Hey everyone, Natalie Antonov here again with Gable Music Ventures and our interview with the music industry experts. Today we have with us, and I'm very excited, Mr. Mark Rogers. He is a radio DJ, host of Hometown Heroes. It's a weekly Sunday night show on Delaware Public Media where he interviews bands and highlights local music being created in the Delaware Valley. It's been going on for over 20 years or so. He's really spearheaded the effort to provide a supportive environment with promotion for local bands who are breaking through, following their growth, and even creating an annual award ceremony, the Homie Awards, to reinforce their hard work and successes. Needless to say, every hometown needs a Mark Rogers. And him and I go kind of way back. We used to work at the same radio group. I think I've known him for 14, 15 years at this point. So I am super excited to get into it with Mark. Let's go. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. How about you, Natalie?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm super excited to talk to you today. I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, with social media, sometimes I forget how long it's been since I've seen someone, but it probably has been a couple of years, which is weird.
Yeah, at least. I mean, definitely not this last year, but maybe some of the years before. But we used to work together long time ago. I said 14, 15 years, and then I realized, man, I'm old. But is that right?
Well, that sounds about right. Yeah, I mean, I've been hosting the show for 15 years now. And yeah, so somewhere in there, that certainly makes sense, yes.
Well, I'm excited to have you, and I really want to get down to business here to figure out what it is that you can talk to these lovely musician folks about, give some tips and advice and stuff like that. So let's start at the beginning. How did you go from being a music fan to carving out your spot in the music industry?
I mean, I don't know that the two were that related, actually. I mean, I've been a music fan for decades, since I was a teenager. And I worked obviously at the radio station, as you mentioned, the same as you. And I worked in various positions. I hadn't been there in a few years when the previous host of Hometown Heroes, Johnny B, moved out of town. And a co-worker of mine, well, at that time he wasn't a co-worker, Steve Michaels / Steve Burster, he told me, hey, he said, why don't you look into hosting Hometown Heroes now that Johnny's gone? I was like, So I contacted the program director. He loved the idea, and it went from there. But I mean, kind of like a lot of people, I didn't have a lot of exposure to local music. I mean, I knew a couple, some of my friends were in bands, so I knew their music, and that's kind of how it is with people. But I had this conception that, all right, I'm going to host this show, and there's going to be some good stuff, and there's going to be a lot of like garage bands that I'll have to wade through. And it actually wasn't like that at all. There was a lot of great quality right from day one with it. And so 15 years later, I'm still doing it. Who knew?
And those bands, the garage bands or the local and indie up and coming artists, I mean, you really do support those. And do you find that's kind of the more or less interesting, I guess, than focusing on like the big bands for you personally?
I mean, it's very different, but yeah, it's certainly more interesting because it's personal. I mean, over these 15 years, I've gotten to know so many people, and I say there's the two things that bring me back to keep doing it. Because, sometimes it's like, I'd like some time off, I'd like get my Sundays back, but the two things that keep me going are the music, because I love music, as we've established, and the people, because I've met so many amazing musicians, and like the number of friends that I have now compared to how many I had 15 years ago, it's astronomically increased just because I've gotten to know these people and become friends with them, and they are so grateful for anything that people can do for them. So like being able to help them out is really, that's a reward in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of the local bands because Gable Music does a lot of booking as well, and I learned a lot of them actually from you, from your show, and from you helping me pick some of them out for the Wilmington Flower Market back when I was booking.
Yeah.
And they are everybody that I've met in the local scene. They're extremely talented, B, extremely nice and kind, and just really cool people. So I definitely agree with you that's, I mean, I can understand why that's a reason why you really can. Yeah. So that's cool. So let's talk about your your job as a radio DJ.
Okay.
What do you do on a daily basis to get ready for your show?
Daily basis, it's kind of just an ongoing process. Like throughout the week, I try to keep up with emails and messages as best I can. I don't get to that every day. I mean, and sometimes they pile up, which most people can probably relate to. But a lot of it's the correspondence, keeping up with the artists, like who are sending me new music or have questions or whatever they want to talk about. And then also, in the last year and a half, since the show moved, I've really tried to be a little more proactive. Like for the first 13 plus years, I was very reactive. Like if an artist would send me their music, I would certainly play it, but I didn't have the time or the need to go looking for new artists because there was so much that was coming in. Yeah. But for some reason, with the change of radio stations and the format changed a little bit, I kind of got it in my head that I decided, well, let me go out and kind of be a little proactive. So I'm finding more bands that, rather than that making them come find me, I'm finding bands that were there and I didn't even know existed.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was actually going to ask you when you were talking, that came up as a question in my head here. That's really cool. So where do you find yourself going to find these? I mean, I know COVID's kind of made things a little bit more difficult, but do you go online, or how do you find these bands?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much online for now. I mean, live performances are starting to pick up again, but until we are able to get fully back out there again. But yeah, a lot of it's postings on social media. Our friend and colleague Danielle, she posts a lot of things about bands and artists, and I've used her recommendations a lot. And I'll go through. I mean, I use Facebook the most. I go through Facebook, and I see something interesting there. I'll just do a screen capture of it, so I can come back. Oh yeah, so I can remember that band and come back and look for it later. But yeah, wherever I hear about it, it's a lot of times it's word of mouth. Like you see someone posting about their friend, their favorite band or favorite artist, something like that. So.
Cool. So in your work DJing here, do you find that there's any specific part of your job that's very difficult?
I always say the most difficult thing is not. I used to say the most difficult thing was deciding what to play each week, because 2 hours, you'd be amazed. I mean, well, you've done the shows, you can probably attest this, but how quickly the 2 hours flies by. And I always think like, I don't have enough music prepared for tonight. I need to get more stuff ready to play. But for me, the most difficult part is what I'm not playing each week, because I put together a list of songs I'd like to play each week. Like I put a little nerdy spreadsheet together of them, and a lot of times I only get to half of them, or 2/3 of them. It's like, and every week it's like, oh, I really wanted to play that song, I just didn't have time. So for me, I think that's the hardest part.
Wait, do you have rollovers? Does it roll over to the next week if you don't?
Oh yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, to some extent, and sure, there's always that flexibility there. But then next week, there's also even more songs I want to play next week. So you can never catch up per se, because there's been so much new music coming out. I feel like, I don't know if it's because of COVID directly or indirectly, but there's the amount of new music I feel like has grown incrementally in the past 2 years.
Yeah, there is a lot out there. I would have to agree with that. Do you find, what's the most rewarding part of what you do?
Well, I guess kind of alluding to what I was talking about before. I mean, just the musicians themselves, like to hear like the heartfelt thanks that they give me, and and I'm not going out looking for accolades or anything like that. But I mean, actually, it's a two-part answer. The first part is, yes, the musicians themselves, the artists, when they really appreciate the exposure, whether it's like playing their song or having them on the show or anything like that. Then the other part, which is really cool, is when I actually hear about someone makes a new fan. Like I play a song by an artist and they let me know later, like, after you played that song, like 5 people bought the song on iTunes. Well, that's when people were still buying music. Or someone came out to my show because they heard about the show on Hometown Heroes, or someone or a listener actually will email me and ask, like, what was that song you played? I really liked it. So anything like that where there's like a connection of some kind. Music is about connections, I think.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah.
So you have, is my understanding that this is not your only line of work. You have other projects you do as well. How do you keep focused with all of the things you have to do and getting prepared for your show?
That is a very good question. I mean, I have my day job, my 9-to-5 day job, which I write legal journals for a living. But so I have to keep them separate because as much as I love doing Hometown Heroes, I have the day job which pays the bills, so I got to focus on that. As for keeping things with, sometimes it does get tough with Hometown Heroes just because I have to squeeze it in at nights and weekends and stuff, and if I have other stuff to do like socializing, laundry, whatever, things that sometimes it is tough. So I don't have a 100% answer to that. I'm still kind of figuring it out, but my Sunday afternoons are dedicated to kind of doing the nitty gritty of the show prep for that night's show. But like I mentioned before, like a lot of that's done throughout the week, like getting the music and kind of just making a kind of a wish list of what I might want to play that week.
Gotcha. Do you do anything like, are you like a coffee person, a meditation person? Do you go out and walk? Do you have anything to like kind of round you out and or is there just literally no time for that because it's hustle, hustle, hustle?
You raise a very good question. I don't do much like that, and I probably should. So I'm open to suggestions, but yeah.
I've heard a lot of different answers from a lot of different people. I think one of the best answers I heard, and I can't remember who told me this exactly. I think it might have been Brian Walker from A Day Without Love, but he said he schedules his day out in 90-minute increments. So he doesn't do any one thing for more than 90 minutes. I think it's 90 minutes. Anyway, I might be misquoting that, but go watch the video on that if you haven't watched that, people who are watching right now. It's A Day Without Love. I did another interview with him, and he was just talking about how he splits it up so it doesn't get overwhelming, and he takes a break and either stretches or does something in between each thing, just so he's not constantly going. And then he actually schedules his lunches, which I started doing after I talked to him, and that's actually really helpful to schedule your lunch into your day.
I don't schedule much. I guess maybe that's where I'm going wrong. I don't do much scheduling. Like I kind of fly by the seat of my pants with a lot of things. So.
Hey, it works, man, and it sounds like it's working because your show is working very well. Everybody has good things to say. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. If it's not working,
there's always room for improvement.
True, though. Very, very true. Do you have, so in your search for bands, and actually rather in the other direction, when bands are trying to get a hold of you and submit their music or share their music, try to get it played on the radio, and maybe not just for you in specific, but do you have any advice for anyone else who might be watching, across the country or whatever, that might be helpful for what to do and not to do when you submit music, or how to do it properly?
Yeah, I have a couple suggestions. I mean, first of all, make sure your request is targeted properly. Like, I mean, anyone who does even a little bit of research on Hometown Heroes can see that it's local music specific to this area, the Delaware Valley. And I'll still have people from California, from Spain, wherever, wanting to submit their music. And I have to very nicely and diplomatically say, I'm sorry, Spain is not local to Wilmington at all, so I cannot play it. So be targeted. Make sure you're sending the music to the right person, to something that makes sense. You're not wasting your time and not wasting their time. When you send it, you can be persistent, and here's the cat. You can be persistent and but don't be annoying. Like you send in a song, and it's cool to do follow-up because everyone's busy, and sometimes something might get lost in the shuffle. So I mean, I appreciate when artists do follow-up and say, did you get my song? Is that something like, you think that's something you're gonna be able to play? Things like that is perfect, but then don't overdo it and be emailing all the time. But yeah, so don't be afraid to be the squeaky wheel, or is that the right term, squeaky wheel, I guess? This is Cooper, by the way.
Hi, Cooper. How are you?
I think only the tail showing up on the screen, but yes.
Yeah, I see it kind of like floating around.
Yeah. And kind of also make sure you're sending stuff in the proper way. Like sometimes, like I always tell people, send me an MP3 or a WAV file, and they'll still send like the Apple files, which I can't use, or things like that. Or just make sure. So I guess to sum it up, make sure you're sending things in the way that people would want to receive it, and make sure that they actually want to receive it, so
all good points. Thank you very much. I think people will find that very helpful, at least if not, make your life easier too.
You know what, another little nitpicky thing too, like if someone sends me like an MP3 of their new song, and so I'll download it off of my email or whatever, and and they've named the file something like new song. All right, put the file in the file name, put your name and the song title, because even though at that moment when I download it, it says in the email what all that is, once it gets downloaded to my computer, and I come back to it a few days later, it says new song. Like,
Ooh.
I have no idea what this is. So yes, so be thorough.
Noted. Great point. Great point. And Cooper actually came around at the appropriate time because I'm about to do a little tiny random facts break here. And
Right.
my first question was in relation to cats. You have 3 of them.
I do have 3 cats.
I was gonna say I'm not gonna tell on you, but I want to know which one's your favorite. But if you can't say because Cooper's in the room, that's cool.
That's tough. I mean, I would say the one that I have that's most bonded to me is my cat Eddie, because I think I got him when he was the youngest, and he'll stay with me all night usually. Not, I mean, Cooper loves me too, but Cooper loves everyone. He anyone that enters the house, a burglar could enter the house, he would love it. And my third cat Thea, she loves me too, but she's scared of everything, so I don't see her as much.
Perfect. All right, now I read something you sent me earlier. Can you please elaborate on mops for me?
Well, I was just kind of thinking of some interesting jobs I'd had in the past, and people always seem amused by the fact that I, for a period of time, worked at a mop factory.
Ah.
Yes, it was just an assembly line type of job. It paid okay at the time. Like I needed a job, and it was there, so I made mops for, I guess, probably the better part of a year. It's not as glamorous as it sounds.
Now, did you make, was it assembly line? Did you have like one particular part in that line?
It changed from day to day. You get to each morning, you'd find out what you were being assigned to. So maybe the one day I had like the metal rod, put the metal rod in, you step on the pedal and it bends it to the right thing. So maybe I did that all day. Then the next day I come in and I have to put like a little plastic stopper on the metal thing. So
you are very open online about having Parkinson's disease. What would you want the public to know about that, and how has it affected your career?
I'm fortunate that it hasn't affected my career very much, because both my day job and Hometown Heroes, it hasn't really affected either of them very much at all. Because as a writer, I work from home already. So, and Hometown Heroes, I'm still able to drive, thankfully, so I can drive to the radio station each week, and every place else I have to go. So I'm very fortunate in that it has not affected either of those. It affected my third job, which was mobile DJing, because I don't have the energy and the stamina I used to. So carting the speakers and everything around got to be a bit much. So now I'm down to 2 jobs, which is probably saner for me anyway. As for what people should know, Parkinson's is different for everyone. Like, the symptoms can differ very much from person to person. Like for me, it affects more, like I take medications every day. I take 4 times a day, and like my energy level throughout the day kind of fluctuates. So when it's getting close to time for the meds, I really my energy level goes way down, and I don't walk as well, and I can't type as well. And then once the meds are kicked in, I feel like I always have. I can walk around the same. You wouldn't even know there was anything going on with me. But so I guess what people should know is it's not a curable disease, but there are ways to treat the symptoms. There are ways to keep active. I need to do better at that, keeping active, because one of the problems of being too busy with having 2 jobs is sometimes I don't have time to be active. So I hope that answers your question. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. And
Sure.
That's something that a lot of people have to deal with, and I'm sure that you never know really, unless you have it yourself, how difficult it is, or any other disease for that matter.
Yeah.
So it's cool to kind of have an inside look into that. So thank you.
Sure.
All right, back to the regular questions here.
All right.
I'm going to guess that after so many years with local indie style bands, you've developed a good ear in kind of being able to kind of pick and choose and guess what songs might turn out to be big, or what artists might turn out to be big. What are some telltale signs that you have noticed over the years that would indicate that might happen to a band?
Yeah, that's a little tough question, because obviously music is so subjective. So I try to not focus on as much as I can on like whether I like the song, because there might be a song that's a quality song, just maybe in a genre that I don't care for as much. I mean, one of the key things, and this is probably obvious, is just production value. I mean, if you try to get a song out there and it sounds like a garage band, like we had mentioned way back at the beginning of the show, it's probably not going to make a lot of impact, because the technology is such that like bands and artists are recording stuff in their own home that sounds as good as a studio would have 15, 20 years ago. So production value is a biggie. Yeah, and I guess just kind of just the whole, because I'm interacting with the artist so much directly, sometimes it's not even the music factors, it's like they're business savvy too. Either theirs, or if they're lucky enough to have an agent or a representative who's working for them. But it's a tough question.
I'm sure it's hard to spot. I've heard a lot of people say, you just have to have that X factor or whatever that is. I mean, have you ever come across a band that ended up, becoming larger and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming? Or conversely, you're like, I knew that was going to happen?
I'd have to dissect what you just said a little bit, because making it big or being successful, if you will, and I had this conversation with someone just the other day, can mean so many different things. Like I can't point to a Hometown Heroes artist who has like become like a nationwide success, but there's probably hundreds of artists that have had success in one way or another, like had their music featured in a TV show or a movie or in a commercial, or has worked with various artists. Like there's plenty of artists that have moved to Nashville, moved to New York, moved to LA to get involved in the business full time, and some of them have become very successful songwriters. So I guess I'm kind of
definition of what one might think is success. It's,
right. Yes, exactly. Like most of them don't become Taylor Swift. That's just not realistic, because there's only so much room out there for so many Taylor Swifts. But
there's only room for one in my mind. Exactly.
But there's many that I think, this is one of the heartbreaks of Hometown Heroes. This is one of the hardest things too, is like there's so many that I think like this artist should be heard by millions of people, and I can do my best to get it out to the people that are listening to Hometown Heroes and are local, but I don't have a whole lot of power to get it to the people in the rest of the country or the rest of the world. But so circling back to your earlier question there, it kind of all ties together, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. I mean, success is definitely defined in different ways, and I think a lot of people have this notion that the only way you really consider it a successful artist is if you turn into something like Taylor Swift, or any level of artist that has giant national notoriety from what they look like. But songwriters oftentimes never get that. They're just by name.
And for some artists, being successful means they get to play out live 3 or 4 times a week, and that's all. They don't want to do it full time. They like doing it on the side, or maybe they do it full time, but just they don't have any aspirations of national success, because that's just not what they want. So again, different measures of success.
Absolutely agree. So do you have any interesting or fun stories from Hometown Heroes over the last 15 years?
Any interesting or fun stories?
Other than for some reason you asked me to host a couple of your shows, which I still don't understand, but thank you.
Oh, it's great. You and other folks, like I had some great. You were in there when we had some of the guest hosts, I guess, came in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like John Fay and Brett Talley, or I forget. Actually, I don't remember who you were matched up with anyway.
Yeah, I think
Boy Wonder, maybe.
Okay, I don't know. There's a few people.
I remember one funny story. This is very random.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Trainer and the Joe Trainer Trio, they were my guests. This is going back more than 10 years ago. They were my guests in studio. And while they were in the studio, I played a song by an artist who was pretty prominent at the time. Her name was Christy Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And the name of her band was called Vogue on Poetry. So it was Christy Jefferson and Vogue on Poetry. And Vogue on Poetry is a reference to the book The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for all the sci-fi nerds out there. And I shared that with the audience. Then I said to Joe and his guys, I said, "Are you familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?" And Joe says, "Am I familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?" he was wearing a button-down shirt like this, and he took it off, and he showed on his arm he had tattooed the little emblem from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think we laughed for like 20 minutes over that, because like, what are the chances of all the artists to be in the studio when I bring up something about hitchhikers and someone that had it emblazoned on his body?
That is awesome. I'm gonna have to ask Joe about that next time I see him. No, that's great. No, that's funny. That's a good story. Do you, in the last couple weeks or months, have you seen any local artists that are making bigger splashes, or just showing up more on your show or anything like that?
I would say some artists that that I keep coming back to. Well, this one's not new, and you know this artist very well. Is over the last several years has been Hoochie Coochie, and Danielle has now branched out, and she's involved. She's done a lot of collaborations and has done some solo stuff. So I feel like there's always something new from either Hoochie Coochie or Danielle. I'm sorry.
Shug Daniels.
I had to get there. Shug Daniels. Exactly.
That is our lovely Danielle from Gable Music Ventures, also known as Shug Daniels.
I mean, Darnell Miller is always doing stuff, and trying to think. I played a good bit of Alyssa. Oh my gosh.
Alyssa Garcia.
Thank you. Very
Yeah,
good.
she's cool.
Yeah, and it's just like so many artists. Like, I've seen her grow over the years. I mean, because she started out, she's still very young, but she was very young when she first started. Just every the release she puts out just gets better and better. Trying to think who else has really impressed me lately. I really like the new Brother Starling album, which has been out, I guess, over a year now. Really good stuff. Mm-hmm. Could be up for some Homie Awards. We'll see. And I mean, Brett Talley always puts out great stuff. His latest album is really good. I mean, and I kind of hate answering questions like this, because there's probably, I'll think of like 300 other artists as soon as we're done, but those are just the ones that are popping to mind right now.
Speaking of, radio and independent artists, digital platforms, streaming services and things like that, have you noticed if they've really changed the game for the independent artists as far as...
big time, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, just figure, when I first started hosting the show, the main digital platform was MySpace.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook hadn't quite taken off yet. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram or anything like that. None of those had existed yet. I mean, there were certainly some digital platforms for like the music end of things. Like, I can't even remember what they were at that point yet. But I mean, with the advent of like Bandcamp, SoundCloud, places where people can really put their music out there, and they can do it immediately. It's all DIY stuff, but it's quality DIY stuff. So you finish recording your album today, you can have it posted on Bandcamp today, and people can stream it or hopefully buy it, and it's immediately available. And the fact that they can so easily get onto like Apple Music and iTunes or and Amazon now too. I mean, I've never had to do that myself, but it sounds like it's a lot easier than it was even a few years ago to do that. So there's so many more options and outlets for artists now, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It seems to be kind of a huge DIY market now, which is maybe why, and this is going back to what you said earlier, maybe why we're hearing so much more music from the local scene, because it's so easy, not saying it's easy, but that it's easy to get it out there and uploaded and done from home rather than having to, do it the old school way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So how did, I'm saying did because we're kind of sort of hopefully at the end of COVID at the time of this taping, not end, but seeing
getting there.
Direction in a positive way.
Right.
Hopefully being able to do live events and hopefully being able to have more live people, in smaller settings. Did COVID, when it was at its height, did it affect your show? Did you have to stop having people in, or how did that work?
Yes. Well, it affected in a couple ways. First, Hometown Heroes went off the air from our original radio station in January of 2020. The last show was the first week in January, and I was lucky in that almost immediately I got a couple offers from like people that wanted to talk about it from various radio stations. And where I ended up with Delaware Public Media, like they had approached me pretty quickly, and we agreed to something right away, but it didn't get on the air until June. So we had about a 6-month hiatus because of the restrictions that they are facing, because we broadcast out of McCain High School in Pike Creek in Wilmington, and the school was completely shut down for months, as a lot of schools were. So we weren't able to get started until 6 months. So yeah, it led to the show being off the air for 6 months. And also, the format changed because, as you mentioned, I used to have guests in studio every week, musicians, and usually they would play live. But again, because of the restrictions that the high school and the school district have, they didn't want to have a lot of people on site. So all my guests for the past, since June of last year, have been by telephone. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's changing in the near future. We'll see. Hopefully so. I can't imagine how the dynamic changes when all you can do is be on a phone and not, actually see the person. As I've gotten into it, it's actually worked out better than I thought it would, because when I had in-studio guests, it was great because we had more time. Usually I'd have one musician or band for the whole 2 hours, and we kind of get to know each other over those 2 hours and, be able to banter back and forth. Now that I'm by phone, I usually have two guests, each for like a half-hour time slot. So obviously more condensed, and so I have to kind of get to the nitty-gritty a little quicker. And we don't have as much time to bond, if you will. But on the other hand, I'd love to go back and archive these sometime, but I feel like in these condensed interviews with them, we've gotten to a lot of more poignant statements or things that have been shared. Like just 2 weeks ago, I think it was AJ Love was on, and he shared some very personal stuff about his struggles with health and his career and all. And there's been a lot of that that's come up, which I've certainly got that in the past within studio, but I don't know, maybe it's something about the format, I don't know, or maybe just because of COVID, people are deeper, I don't know, but I feel like I've had a little more hard-hitting and stories that people can relate to a bit more with these condensed, not in-person interviews. Well, that's really cool. Yeah, it's funny how it turns out sometimes, changing it up a little bit isn't such a bad thing. So. Yeah, agreed. So this is a question I ask everyone that comes through this little segment I do. What is one piece of advice that you would give your past self to help you get to where you are today, just a little faster or easier? Well, that's a tough one too, because I kind of fell into this position. I wasn't looking to get back because I wasn't ready to at all at the time. As I mentioned earlier, I was kind of been off the air for a few years. So it's hard for me to give, I guess maybe looking at it through that, maybe be more proactive than reactive in a lot of things, because it isn't easy, especially in my life, as we mentioned, things get busy, don't always have time to go out trying new things, but often when you do, it can lead to good things, or even sometimes being reactive, like it's just talking about the show format and all. But maybe if I can learn to be a little more proactive, then who knows? But maybe you could have gotten to things quicker. It's a good piece of advice. I love asking that because I get so many different answers from everybody, and I feel super interesting look into how they feel everything has gone for them. And you're right. When you do fall into something, a lot of times it's not like you were planning it, but you still learn through that process. So I'm glad you shared that. Last but not least, if there is an artist who perhaps wants to get in touch with you or work with you, what is the best way for them to do that? Presently, the best way would be to either email me at hthmrogers@gmail.com or message me through Facebook, either my personal page or the Hometown Heroes page. Mm-hmm. I just launched a couple weeks ago the brand new Hometown Heroes website, which is hometownheroesmusic.com. Mm-hmm. I have it up there right now because we're in the midst of the Homie Awards and doing the voting and all in there. Much of the rest of the page is not yet up to date. I want to get the concert page back up and running. I want to get update the artist pages, because these are artists. Some of these artist listings go back to bands that haven't existed in probably a decade, and I need to get through and kind of clean them out a bit and catch up on the artists from the past year that I haven't put up there. But eventually I hope to have a lot of resources for artists on that page. So still to come. So, but big ideas in the works. Great. And the handle for your social media pages, your Facebook at least, is at Hometown Heroes Delaware Valley. What was it? I forget. At Hometown Heroes DE Valley, I believe.
Okay, cool. We'll whatever it is, we'll figure it out and we'll post it in the description for everybody.
Okay, right down there. Okay, good.
You do that.
That's really my only social media that I do anything with. So yeah.
So that's a good one for people to know. Okay, we'll put that in the description for sure. And that, my friend, concludes our interview for the day. I am so happy you took some time to chat with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I love having you, man. And hopefully we can hang out soon in real life, IRL, right? Thank you for everybody who's watching. I just want to ask you guys to go ahead and subscribe and smash that bell if you're interested in getting notifications as to all the upcoming videos that we have, interviews with the experts and tips Shug Daniels has for you guys on the music industry. You know, things from copyrights to royalties to better band practice, everything that you might want to know about how to get yourself started. She's got answers for you. If you have any other people you want us to interview or any other topics you'd like us to cover, just go ahead and throw them down in the comments. We want to hear from you. And other than that, I think that's it for the day. I guess we'll talk next time. Bye.